Dr. Kούλeϊ, thank you for being with SKAI tonight.
It's my pleasure.
What are we currently looking at? Do you sense that Vladimir Putin is posing a threat to the whole Europe right now?
Absolutely. He's posing a threat to Europe and the whole underlying post-Cold War international order. This whole system of sovereignty and security. He has been complaining about it for some time. We had the Georgia-Russia war of 2008. We had 2014. But this time, seeing Ukraine slip westward, he decided to take it upon himself and press the ultimate button of trying to, by force, change Ukraine's orientation.
Were you expecting that?
I was not expecting this full-out invasion. Perhaps a recognition of the other territories, but I don't think many in the expert community thought that he would have the audacity to try and invade and hold a country. And in fact, it seems like the plan wasn't to hold the country. The plan was to enact regime change, and he's been so far unsuccessful at that.
What do you think is his main objective? What we're looking at here, are we expecting Putin to possibly invade even Moldavia?
Moldova could be a possibility in the sense that Putin is very concerned about post-Soviet states that are not already lost, like the Baltics, orienting westwards. Association with the EU, with the West, with NATO, of course. And so previously, he thought through a decentralization agreement, he could exercise a veto over Ukraine. What he saw that Zelensky was not willing to implement those parts of the Minsk agreement. And so he felt that this was the time to change Ukraine by force, otherwise be irrevocably lost. But certainly Moldova is another one of those post-Soviet states that's fractured and where he ultimately wants to control.
During the Cold War, there was this containment doctrine, and there was a nuclear terror balance. With Russian forces taking over a nuclear plant, I wonder how safe we should consider ourselves here in Europe.
Well, of course, wars can always spiral out of control. I think you saw a very concerning firefight yesterday that was diffused. But of course, we have 15 nuclear power plants in Ukraine. And some of them are much more modern technology than Chernobyl and can withstand hits. But of course, this is all part of, I think, the psychology of trying to indicate that, he means business.
Is this a new Cold War that we're all facing?
I think certainly this is a protracted conflict between two blocs. In the post-Cold War era, the blocs had become entangled. That is, Western capitalism, Western companies had come to Russia, and Russians had embraced it. And then Russian oligarchs had embraced the West. What you're seeing is the extrication of that relationship.
But a lot of analysts claim that this is not a Cold War. We're actually looking at a hot war in Europe.
Well, the hot war is the scenario we all want to avoid, and especially the escalation of the hot war, especially into a potential NATO-Russia conflict,
Everyone wonders what the role of China will be in this conflict. And do you have any indications of how Beijing is currently evaluating the situation?
We have a few clues. Clearly, China considers Russia a strategic partner, but it also sees severe reputational damage from what is happening now. I don't think it had imagined that Russia would be so isolated and also would try the full-scale assault that it's doing now. Very interestingly, we're seeing a dual Chinese track. On the one hand, they are abstaining and supporting Russia in the UN. But just today, for instance, Chinese-led multilateral development banks said that they would oust Russia and Belarus from their portfolios, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the New Development Bank. So China is certainly concerned that sanctions could pose a threat to its own companies and its own investments. So it wants to try and isolate the damage that it does. At the same time, China is in a very good position to dictate new economic relationships to China in terms of investments, oil and gas, on its terms, because Russia will have no alternative under this sanctions regime.
Now, is there a good case scenario for this conflict that we could look into, possibly?
The good case scenario is that the West, in coordination with Ukraine, identify a set of strategic objectives that they would be okay with and try and convince Vladimir Putin to de-escalate. The worst case scenario is Vladimir Putin feels threatened on two fronts now. He feels threatened that the war in Ukraine is not going to plan, but he also sees internal turmoil. he's doubly threatened from outside and inside. And so the nightmare scenario is somehow this escalates in a full-blown conflict involving Russia and NATO, or possibly Belarus and NATO on that border.
And during the last couple of years, we were talking about the idea of the US departing Europe and shifting their focus to other parts of the world. And I wonder whether the Ukrainian crisis are sending the US back to Europe.
Well, I think recent history is replaying itself. Just like President Obama talked very openly about wanting to pivot to Asia, and the Baltic states were very upset, and East European allies were very upset, and then we had 2014. Now we see a similar dynamic, that the priority of the Biden administration had been to focus on China and put relations with Russia on a stable and management front, and of course that hasn't happened.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kούλεϊ.
My pleasure.
Thank you.